All right, Article 9, freedom of religion, thought, and conscience. So, the most important thing to know here, I already went through it as a primary example in my explanation of Articles 8 to 12. The most important part to just take note of is it has, just as the others, a 2-point system of Article 9.1 and point 2. Point 9 being the what is being protected, and then the point 2 is how it is limited. Or rather, how it might not be limited, right? Depending on if it was proportional or even allowed at all. But yeah, there are parts which are absolute. So if you read, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. That is an absolute right. Freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in worship, teaching, practice, and observance. Okay? As you can see, it also says either alone or in community with others, as I explained in the other video, but also as I'll explain now. Manifesting your religion can still be an absolute right if you are within a religious context, a community, let's say within a mosque, a court, a church, and so on. But then that freedom to be religious or just have conscience and thought can be limited if it infringes other people's rights. Now, this article has been placed upon Article 8 as a sort of vis-a-vis, so against each other. There have been cases where, for instance, a hijabi woman had been practically frozen out of her position in her work due to the fact that she was wearing a hijab and as a receptionist, and they didn't want her to stay. I don't recall what this case is called. I know that people from Sweden know, especially Uppsala. So if anyone could just comment it down there with the timestamp, if anyone's that nice. But yeah, anyways, this was a very crazy case of where they pretty much said, yeah, you're limiting this person's right to a religion, and it's also discriminatory according to Article 14. But it's still okay for the company to exclude her rights, partly because they're private, but also partly because they had an excuse of the people that came in might be offended with their right to a private life by seeing her wearing hijab. That's how it's worked. That's how they've made these assessments. Now, is that actually fair? If you look at it from a monetary perspective, it actually could be, but that's about systematic and polarizing ideas within politics, where people are taught to judge, for instance, this woman who had the hijab. I believe that this goes into a positive obligation of the state. Someone wearing a hijab in the context of a working place, offending anyone who walks in enough to take away this woman's right to wear her religious clothing, just as a means of losing money because people won't want to walk in if a woman with a hijab a woman with a hijab is in a reception. That to me is a failure of a positive obligation of the state. Now, some people may disagree. I'd say the convention in itself would disagree, but as a human being, I feel like that makes sense. If not, then what does systematic structures actually anchor itself to? I mean, are we going to say that OpenAI, DeepSeek, and these ginormous industries of technology, are they the ones responsible? Or is the state actually going to say, yeah, that's our bad? Like, we can't be in a situation where monetarily a person loses money or a judicial person loses money because their receptionist has chosen to wear a hijab, right? Because I think that was the case in that one, where she originally didn't wear one, but then she decided to. Please, everyone, roast me like hell if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure I remember this case correctly. Article 9.2 makes the manifestation of religion a very, very weak protection for those that are supposed to be protected by 9.1, concerning manifestation outside of your own religious group. The margin of appreciation is huge here, unfortunately. As a student in law, I was very disappointed with this. I mean, they were bragging about the absolutism of being religious, but that's stupid to me. Why does it matter if I can't actually prosper as an individual through my belief, even manifested through my own symbolism of clothing? That shouldn't be a problem, especially if that thing encapsulates my whole identity. Then the world is pretty much telling me, or the convention is telling me, that my existence in itself is provocative to other people's private life. That's what happened to the woman. Because she has the right to exist. But her right to exist in some way infringes on someone else's right to feel comfortable. That in itself is contradictory, if you ask me. Moving on. Obst v. Germany. A man was fired from the Mormon church due to adultery. The case found the firing to be okay due to objective obligation or preemptive understanding. I'm not sure if objective obligation is the correct term in English, but that's how we use it in Swedish. Objektiv ansvarighet, where you have the obligation as an individual living in the world or in your country to, just by being able to self-actualize your mind, meaning just being conscious, you should be able to understand that certain things are not okay, right? And if you're working in the Mormon church and you're committing adultery, that's probably an objective obligation on your part to understand that that's not okay, and that is a punishable offense. Meaning Article 9 does not give a damn. Moving on. This is a made-up example. If it's like a teacher asking for the right to a private life within their job, yet they were fired from their job for having been found guilty to have abused their children, physical or non-physical. It would make sense, no? Now let's say the same person abuses their child, but they work within cleaning, okay? I don't know. Maybe in the case of the people that hired them, they maybe want to fire them anyways, even though they're just cleaners in the context of hitting their children, or not just, but just they aren't directly connectable, right? Being able to clean stuff doesn't mean that you're able to not hit your children, but if you're able to be a good teacher, you're probably going to be able to resist from hitting your child. Thereby, if you're able to hit your child, you're probably going to be unable to be a good teacher. And the same way here, if you work within the Mormon church and you commit adultery, you're probably not going to be able to be a good contributor to the idea. And even if you are lying to everyone around you. Same way goes for a teacher, right? If you're hitting your own child, even if the kids like you, you're living through an example that's made up from a lie. And then Article 14, see my video about it. I'm not going to get into it too much. I sort of explain it by assuming that you guys understand it because the video already exists. It's pretty much just not being discriminated. And remember, Article 14 only works as a supplementary article. That's why it's very big within Article 9, because usually discrimination is within religious contexts. And you can also imagine that religious contexts intertwine with ethnical contexts, immigrational contexts, and so on. And then you have 2017, number 23. That's a case from Sweden within the Court of Workers, meaning a specialized court. I spoke a little bit about this in the previous video about Article 8 to 11, how you approach them. Pretty much a midwife was like, oh, it's my religious right to not abort someone's child. And the state was like, no, you have a medical obligation, which also then goes under your objective obligation, right? Because how can you be a midwife and refuse abortions? You should have known before that you were going into a line of work where you had to do this. And most of the time, these are situations which have medical reasons, right? And legally speaking, at least within Sweden, I'm pretty sure it's a 12-week span of protection for a woman to abort her child. But then there are also cases of a woman being able to choose if she wants to abort a child because there have been found risks, right? And there are certain religions or certain people within certain religions that might believe that is not okay, that a woman has an obligation to risk her life for a child. But legally speaking, they don't.